Over the last decade, technology has played a major part in solving murders that both police and families thought were going to remain unsolved forever. Here are 5 cold cases solved within the last few years. If you want more details on any of the cases mentioned, be sure to follow the link in the description. Shannon, Lloyd, and Renee Cuaves. In May 1987, a 23-year-old called Shannon Lloyd was found strangled to death in her apartment in Orange County, California. She had also been sexually assaulted. Only 2 years later, in 1989, Renee Cuaves' body was found on the side of the road in a small city called Bree in California. She had also been sexually assaulted and strangled. DNA was taken from both of these crime scenes, but they were originally investigated separately. There was no match to a suspect at the time. It wasn't until 2003 when the DNA database CODIS revealed that the samples from both crime scenes were a match. This meant that police now had a double homicide on their hands. In 2021, police decided to use something called genetic genealogy. This is the process of using an unknown DNA sample and comparing it to the databases that have been built up over the years and looking for a partial but not exact match. Once they find a partial match, that is then used to create a family tree based on genetic similarities to hopefully lead back to the unknown owner of the DNA sample. In doing so, this led to a Reuben Smith. Police determined that Mr. Smith had in fact been living in the target area in the late 80s. They found that he had actually been arrested for sexual assault and attempted murder in 1998 in Las Vegas, but he was never convicted due to the lack of evidence. During this arrest, a DNA sample was taken from him, which came back as a match to the stored samples from both of the girls' murders. After his arrest in 1998, it's apparent that he couldn't deal with the idea of being caught for what he had done to the girls, as he committed suicide in 1999. Robert Reed. On May 22, 2002, in Elkhart County, Indiana, Robert Reed was found beaten to death in his home by a neighbor who went round to check on him when she found his door was wide open and thought it to be suspicious. There was a large amount of blood under his head, and there was a large cut above his right eye, which was swollen. His head was misshapen due to the beating he had taken. Police located bloodstains on the kitchen and bathroom floors, as well as on the inside deadbolt of the front door. In the bedroom, the furniture had been moved around during an apparent struggle. An autopsy found that Robert Reed had died due to the multiple injuries he had sustained to his head and neck. It was ruled as a homicide. Unfortunately, his case went cold as the blood from the crime scene seemed to test all as a match to the victim and not of his attacker. In 2021, an unnamed witness spoke to the police and said that Marcus Love had spoken about how he committed the murder to them soon after it happened. The witness said they noticed he had blood on his clothes and cuts on his fingers. When investigating the claims, police found another witness who confirmed that Marcus would go around to Robert Reed's home around that time to take drugs with him. When reviewing the evidence of the case with fresh eyes, Sergeant Greg Harder noticed in the crime scene photos that there was an area of bloodstain on the back of the victim's shirt as if it had dropped onto him by someone standing above him whilst Robert was lying on the floor. In 2022, a partial DNA profile was found on the shirt that confirmed it was a mixture of 2 different people's blood. It came back as a match for Marcus Love and Robert Reed. In August 2022, Marcus was charged with 1 count of murder. Colette Aram. In October 1983, 16-year-old Colette Aram was walking to her boyfriend's house when she went missing. The day after, she was found beaten, strangled, and raped in a field nearby. Her body had been purposely arranged into a sexually provocative pose. The only evidence the police managed to collect was a paper towel from a nearby pub called the Generous Britain. When the landlady noticed a customer had blood on his hand, she gave the paper towel he used to the police. There were DNA traces of Colette found and a sample of her killer, but it did not match anyone in the system. During the investigation, her killer wrote a letter to the police boasting that he was still free. It read, "No one knows what I look like. This is why you have not got me. You will never get me." He mentioned that he wore a Halloween mask during the act. The case eventually went cold. In June 2008, a DNA swab was taken from a man due to be arrested for a driving offense. When it was ran through the database, it was found to be a relative match from the profile taken from the paper towel in Colette's case. His father, Paul Hutchinson, was an exact match. When police arrested Paul, he was planning on blaming the murder on his dead brother. However, when he found out that they had already done a DNA test with his brother's sample, he changed his plea to guilty. In court, the true horror of what happened to Colette Aram was revealed. Paul Hutchinson admitted that on the day of the murder, he had hidden in a shed watching young girls at a riding school. He stole a car and drove to Cuaves and armed himself with a bread knife. Then he approached two other schoolgirls. When unsuccessful, he got back into the stolen vehicle and started to drive around. This is when he came across Colette. He bundled her into the back of a Ford Fiesta and drove to the field. He beat her over the head with a bottle before raping her and strangling her. He then drove to the pub to have a sandwich afterwards. At the time of the murder, Paul only lived a 15-minute drive from Colette. He had recently completed a psychology degree, which is why he decided to write the taunting letter to the police when they were investigating. He was convicted for the murder and got sentenced to life behind bars. 8 months into his sentence, he committed suicide. The Golden State Killer. In May 1973 to August 1976, Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. was a burglary unit police officer in Exeter, California. He was fired when he was arrested for shoplifting. Throughout his life, he had moved around and was given different names by the press. In the San Joaquin Valley, he was known as the Visalia Ransacker due to a string of burglaries he had committed. He then moved to Sacramento, where he became known as the East Area Rapist. He was also given the name the Night Stalker when he committed several murders in the Santa Barbara, Ventura, and Orange County areas. He is believed to have taunted and threatened both victims and police in phone calls and written communications. During his reign of terror, the police and media were none the wiser that it was the same person who had committed all of these crimes. In 2001, DNA testing revealed that the Night Stalker and the East Area Rapist were in fact the same person. Even after this development, they were still no closer to figuring out who it was. In 2013, crime writer Michelle McNamara gave him the nickname the Golden State Killer. On June 15, 2016, the FBI and local law enforcement agencies held a news conference to announce a renewed nationwide effort offering a $50,000 reward for the Golden State Killer's capture. In 2017, detectives decided to use the killer's DNA profile to the personal genomics website GEDmatch. The website identified 10 to 20 people who had the same great-great-great-grandparents as the Golden State Killer. A team of 5 investigators working with a genealogist used this list to construct a large family tree. From this, they established 2 suspects. One was ruled out by a relative's DNA test, which left Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. On April 18, 2018, a DNA sample was collected from the door handle of DeAngelo's car, and another sample was later collected from a tissue found in his curbside bin. Both were a match to the numerous amounts of DNA collected and associated with the Golden State Killer crimes. This was also the time that they connected the Visalia Ransacker crimes to him as well. Due to the statute of limitations, he could not be charged for the burglaries and rapes in 1970, but he was charged with 13 counts of murder and 13 counts of kidnapping. April 10, 2019, prosecutors announced that they would be seeking the death penalty. On June 29, 2020, as part of a plea deal to avoid the death penalty, D'Angelo pleaded guilty to 13 counts of first-degree murder and special circumstances, which included murder committed during burglaries and rapes, as well as 13 counts of kidnapping. On August 21st, 2020, he received multiple consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. He offered a brief apology to the victims' families after listening to impact statements for several days in a row. The Lake City Torso Murder. On June 5, 1994, remains were found behind a petrol station in a bin in Lake City, Florida. They found a torso that was missing its head, legs, and hands. Several items related to the murder were also found at the scene, which included a blood-soaked flannel shirt, a mattress cover, bathtub safety pads, and bloody knives, which were thought to be the murder weapon. Even though DNA from both victim and suspected killer were collected, both remained a mystery to the police. In 2015, police managed to identify the victim as 16-year-old Fred Laster after DNA testing his twin sister. Laster's sister told police that the last person her brother was seen with was Ronnie Hyde, a licensed mental health counselor at the time. Police obtained a search warrant for his home in 2017. They found knives and egg crate-style mattress toppers that matched similar objects found at the crime scene. They also found a red long-sleeved flannel shirt with blood stains and orange gloves with stains, along with evidence of child pornography as well as a homemade display of sex offender mugshots. A witness from the time of the murder stated that they saw a charcoal-coloured sports car back up to the bin that morning prior to the petrol station opening, and police discovered that Ronnie Hyde drove a Camaro at the time. His DNA matched multiple samples taken from the scene. On April 1st, 2022, 62-year-old Ronnie Hyde was convicted for the murder of 16-year-old Fred Laster and for the possession of child pornography. He was also accused of luring children to his home to abuse them. However, he did not get convicted of this.